Thank you, JS and Auntie Helen. So, still on social impact, my guest today is also a social impact entrepreneur. She's Farida Ladipo Ajayi, and she's advocating for literacy in Nigeria. She's the founder and literacy leader at the Bookworm Cafe. Now, the Bookworm Cafe is a children's literary consultancy that owns a children's library and store and facilitates several impactful literacy programs for improving literacy outcomes for Nigerian children. Now, this, if you know, is very important and also very dear to me. Now, the Bookworm Cafe also raises awareness about good African children literature in schools and homes. Now, Farida is a Tony Elumelu entrepreneur and a Cher Blair mentee. Thank you for joining us, Farida.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, how's your morning been so far?
Going well so far. Okay. It's going well.
All right. So why is it important for us to start children very early, raising literacy among young children? Why is it that important?
Yeah, so literacy is important because literacy is like the foundation of everything. So there's nothing you do in life that you don't need literacy for. Mm-hmm. Even if you say, I'm not going to be a writer, or I'm not going to be on TV, you're going to do math. You need to read the questions. You're going to do science. You need to read the questions. So it's the foundation of everything. You need to learn to read and to learn to read well so that you can at least communicate with other people, and you can communicate by speaking and communicate in writing. If you can't do that, then yeah, as good as not existing. You can't function in a society. So it's important because it helps you, even in terms of cognitive development, the way you think. Literacy affects the way you think. You think better when you are able to, when you read and when you are able to express yourself in writing as well. Your thoughts are smarter. Your thoughts are, you communicate better, and you generally are a more, you contribute to society essentially when you take literacy as an important element in your life.
All right. So you know the theme for the show today is on community awareness, and I know that you organize literacy programs. But how does it work? Do you just take children of the privileged, or you get across and take children that are not so privileged? Because it's like there's just like a certain divide. Now, children go to public school. Some children are not even going to school at all. How do you match that and ensure that everybody gets on board?
Okay, so two ways. So the first way is, one of our dreams is to be able to set up community libraries in as many communities around Nigeria. So just like you have churches on every street, my dream is for us to be able to have somewhere children can walk in to read on every street in Nigeria. That's the dream. So right now, what we started with doing was to create small community libraries in conjunction with the schools. So every Saturday, we meet in each of these schools. The children come for what we call book club or literacy club. So we bring books to these centers, and the children come. We read the books. We have literacy coaches who work with the children. Lots of issues that we've noticed that I didn't even know that existed before we started. So some children not being able to read at all, some children with terrible, serious comprehension issues. So they're reading, but they don't understand what they're reading. And then some of them with grammar issues. So we've seen all of these things, and the books that we've been able to use with them and the methods or the strategies we've used with them has helped them to improve in literacy. So typically, most of the children who go to our book clubs, you find that they come best in literacy in their schools. It always happens. During prize giving day, we're always contacted, oh, my child won best in literacy. Thank you for the impact. And then secondly, we support a lot of NGOs that give gifts to children. So NGOs that support different organizations across Nigeria. So they tell us that they want to visit a school or they want to visit a community, and they need to give things to the children that will be impactful in their lives. We have contact with a lot of authors because we also have a bookstore. So they also support us by giving us books, and we pass on to these organizations. Okay. So those are the two aspects: the children who are not so privileged and the children who are a bit more privileged. So somehow we're able to reach across to the different bands.
Okay. So how do you now reach out to parents? Because you see, in this environment now, it's sad that we all just focus on money. I think many more parents are, if they say, oh, if there's a music club, entertainment seems like to be on the front burner. So how do
Yeah.
you now convince parents that literacy will help with their children's, reasoning and just their general outlook on life? How do you get them on board?
So one thing that has been really helpful for us when we started very small, and the word got out when parents started to tell their friends, my child is in this book club, and my child is able to read better, my child can spell better. So our first advocates, or our first the referrals have worked a lot for us, because parents will always tell their friends if something is working for them. So that's one of the ways we've been able to reach parents. The second way is we work a lot with schools. So just yesterday I did a WhatsApp training for a group of schools. What I did in the training was I trained the parents on the importance of literacy, importance of reading early, and importance of getting books for their children's libraries. And there were so many parents there. The discussions are still ongoing, but just from that WhatsApp platform alone, I've been able to connect with a lot of parents, most of them not in Lagos, Calabar, Uyo. So that's how through all of these small platforms, we're able to connect with parents, and they know the brand and they ask us questions. How can you help us with this? My child is not reading. What should I do? All of those kinds of things.
Okay, so tell us, what is the importance of setting a child out early reading? So, for example, I was sharing earlier in the studio before you came on with you about how I started my son reading quite early, and I've seen the progress. So, tell us, what are the advantages of setting out to read to children early, and how does it affect their reasoning?
Okay, so I talked about cognitive developments from the start. You will find that children who start to read early, or who get used to books early, they know things because they're exposed to a lot of information. They understand their world better because they read these things in books. They understand other people's cultures better, so they are able to appreciate what some other person in a different environment is going through. It also helps with their vocabulary as well. So, for instance, when you're speaking, you don't use your vocabulary bank is what you already know in your head. All the words you've heard that have been said to you or you heard in school. But when you're reading books, you are somehow they are depositing more words into your bank, and when you're speaking, it shows in what you all of a sudden you have access to a bank of more words. When you're writing, you're not looking for what's the word I want to use for this, and also even it helps in other areas. So like I said, most of our children come out with best in literacy, but you also find that by extension, we see best in science, best because they're able to comprehend what they're reading. So math is not as difficult as it used to be because they now understand the principles behind it, because they can read and they can understand. And from my own experience and the experience of my children and the children that we work with, you just see that when children are exposed to books early, they just become more aware of their surroundings. The way they speak to you, you'll be wondering, is this child really the age that the child is? And that's because of what they've deposited in their brains and in their consciousness from the books that they've read.
Fantastic. That's, for me, I've experienced it. So you're just literally like preaching to the choir. It works like magic. People are always wondering,
it does work.
It works absolutely like magic. Okay, so two more questions before I let you go. First of all, it's about dyslexia. So you know that, so it's fantastic that we want to get everybody reading and reasoning quite early. But how do you help children with dyslexia? Because in this environment, even though there's a lot of awareness going, just say, Olodo, he doesn't know it's coconut head. And then how do you help children with dyslexia with this, your reading awareness?
Okay, so one thing I'd like to say is that children would eventually learn to read, even if they have a reading disorder. Some children learn to read later than others. Some children will read early. Some children will just start to read on their own, just because on their own in their spare time just use to pick up books, so they don't need as much literacy instructions. So children will be different. But once you start to notice that your child is struggling with reading and spelling consistently, and I like to say give it time, because here we like to say, oh, my child started to read at 3. It's like a competition. It's not necessary. Some children start to read at 5, and before you know it, they're reading like children who are 7 and 8. So you need to give it time, first of all. Ensure that you expose the children to books. adequate number of books. Always ensure that they have books around them, and ensure that you expose them to all kinds of literacy experiences, and then you continue to watch. Let them practice. When you start to notice that there's no difference from like age 6, 7, and you're still concerned, that's when you now need to see a specialist to get it done. And don't just assume that a child is dyslexic if you haven't done a test. Sometimes people diagnose wrongly without going for an assessment. You need to assess children before you say they are dyslexic. And I also like to say to parents who have children living with dyslexia, I know a lot of authors today who started to read really late, 9, 10. I'm talking really, really late, the kind of late where you start to panic. And today they are authors. They command their spoken language and written language because when the parents noticed that they had dyslexia, they had to put in the work and ensure that your child is not in that environment where they are called a Ludo. Your child is not a Ludo. Your child is just special and learns in a special way. I have a cousin who was diagnosed with dyslexia, I think around age 8. He just graduated from university with very good grades this year. And yes, a lot later than his colleagues, but he's doing fantastic. He's very good with the arts, and he's doing well with what he has learned how to do. So don't let anybody label your child as Olodo. And I always try to say to them, teachers, because sometimes it's difficult for teachers when you're teaching a child to read and the child is not learning. It takes a lot of patience to work with children with dyslexia, but eventually these children will learn to read. But you need to be patient with them.
All right, thank you. So let's talk more about African literature. I grew up reading a lot of foreign books, and even till now, for my child, I get like a lot of foreign books. There are a few African and Nigerian authors out there, but not as flooded as the foreign authors. So
Yes.
what do we need to do? Because there's already a disconnect. We're watching, the foreign culture on TV. We're living it every day, and even our storytelling is not telling that. What do we need to do about having more African stories in the hands of our children?
So this is an area I'm really passionate about, and initially when I first started the Bookworm Cafe, I didn't really pay attention to African literature because I had seen that over time some of them, the quality had really dropped. But then there became this boom where there are new authors, and the quality of the books we are producing is fantastic. It can stand side by side with books that are produced internationally. So for me, every opportunity I get on different platforms, internationally, locally, I always make sure that I recommend books written by Nigerian authors. I'm in several reading clubs, teacher reading clubs in different groups across the world. And usually in those groups, you recommend books that your children use and that are good for your children. I will always put up a Nigerian book and tell people that. And especially when there's an Amazon link, they go and check it out. So I will always put it up and tell them that this is what this book is about. And they're always, every time, just from the cover, they're always fascinated by these kinds of books. Also, we have a lot of Nigerians moving abroad to different parts of the world. I make it easy for them to get African titles from us so that their children are connected to their heritage and they can always continue to read these books wherever they are in the world. So those are some of the things that we do to encourage families and schools to embrace African literature.
Okay, fantastic. And I just wanted to find out, it's one thing to have an idea and it's another thing to set out. What are the challenges and fears that you went through, Farida, in setting up this? It has grown now and has become this thing, but how do you now get from just having this idea in your mind to setting out to doing it?
Well, in terms of challenges, yes, it's been really challenging because literacy is not like all of these high-profile businesses. First of all, it takes a lot of passion and it takes a lot of trying to get people to buy into the vision so that you have volunteers to work with you. Because when you have volunteers that are driving the vision, it gets easier for you to be able to push the message out without, breaking the bank, essentially. But there's a lot of challenges in terms of just getting parents to see the importance of buying a single book for a child. But advocacy is our business, so we always talk about reading every opportunity we get, school PTA meetings, different opportunities that present themselves. We always take advantage of those opportunities. Different platforms, WhatsApp, social media, everywhere we're present.
Okay. I know I said I was going to let you go, but I just wanted to go back to community, going back to, because today we're on the show, we're focusing on community awareness. What difference will this make? Imagine if we now have more libraries, because I dare say we have more beer parlors in Lagos
Oh,
than we have
definitely.
libraries. We have very few
Definitely.
children parks and very few places where
Yeah.
children can go and read. But what difference do you project that it will make in our life? Because the thing is, most times we like to say things, we're Nigerians, we like money, naira and kobo. But what impact do you think, like in a year or two, if we improve the literacy of children, even the literacy of the community as a whole, what impact will it have on us as a community?
So I think that it would affect the way the everyday man thinks. So the guest that was on now was talking about people urchins on the streets. If these people are a little bit more aware in terms of having access to basic literacy materials everywhere around them, somehow their level of thinking will be a bit different. It affects everybody on the street. The security man, it affects the parent, it affects the people high up there and everybody when there are community libraries everywhere. But most especially for me is if there are libraries that are accessible for children who haven't started school. Libraries would usually be like the first platform for them to be introduced to literacy. So they start to get used to books, they start to get used to words. And by the time they come into school, education is a lot easier. The barriers are less for them because they've been exposed to literacy from before school has started. So they struggle less when they start school. And school education becomes a lot more easier and they can aspire to do more as they grow older in their education and in their lives.
All
So
right.
early literacy for me is the impact that community libraries will really make a difference in.
All right. Thank you so much, Farida, for your time. Thank you, and continue with your great work. Fantastic job that you're
Thank you.
doing.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. All right. I'll be back with John and Helen on the other side shortly. Stay with us.